I can tell you about how this turned into a book, the poems for meditation, because it's a ludicrous premise, really, because it's only 4 poems, and they're only, I think it's less than 100 words, the whole thing. You know, each poem's like 20 words or something, and and it started from a very personal need, which is I wrote them as an easier way to meditate, because if I sit down and try and meditate, it feels like still in my head, it feels like a hard thing to do. You know, it feels like a piece of work to do. Whereas if I think of reading a poem, it feels like a treat. I'm like, oh, this will be nice. I'll read a poem. And so I basically wrote these 4 poems to kind of mimic 4 stages of meditation. So you do the poems as a way of doing a meditation. And if you read the 4 poems, they kind of shift your mindset, and they bring you to a place of clarity just by reading them. So you don't have to think of yourself as a meditator. You don't have to think of, you know, sitting on a cushion and being special or anything like that. You're just like, you can turn up however you're feeling and whoever you are, and you just start reading the poem, because that's what you do with a poem, is you read it, and your mind does its job of reading it and taking it in. But it's almost like it's like medicine, where you eat it, but then it just starts doing stuff, and you can't kind of help that. And but part of me being not very good at meditating was I knew that no matter how nice these poems were, I would most likely just leave them in the notes folder on my phone and then forget they existed, or I would print them out, but then they'd end up in a different folder somewhere, and they just wouldn't have any presence in my life, and so they wouldn't change anything. And so for me, I needed them to be a book, to give them a presence in my life. And I needed them to be in a book that was undistracting, and a book that was beautiful, but not because beautiful things are nice, but because it's kind of like, if it's beautiful, it means it's true to the need. You know, it's like, if the book was made if I made the book thoughtlessly, then it's almost like if I picked it up in the morning, it would inspire me to be thoughtless, or it would kind of confirm to me, like, yeah, being thoughtless is fine. And so it's like I needed the book to be a physical representation of the place that I was trying to get to. And so I think this is where we meet, actually. This is where, because we were talking about this before, and this is where you said, like, oh, we need to talk more about this. It was that I found that what I was working against was all the assumptions I had about what a book had to be, or an ebook had to be, or you know, ISBN numbers and things like that, and getting things printed and and I had to question them. I had to challenge all of those, because I needed to because I wouldn't meet the need for me. And so the first thought I had was like, well, I'm not going to sell it in a shop, like, because most books I think most books probably don't get sold in actual shops these days. And so I was like, I'm going to be sending it out to people, so it doesn't need a barcode. And I was like, oh, that's nice, because if it was a book about meditation, then it not having a barcode on the back, that's like one less distraction. And then at a certain point, I was like, it doesn't actually need any writing on the cover either. It doesn't need a blurb on the back. And I was like, oh, that's good. And then in the end, I settled on, if I can just put the title on a slip of paper, then you can just take it off, and then it's completely got nothing on it. And it felt like, if I have a spot where I sit down to meditate in the morning, if I sit down there and there's a book and it's got, you know, Russell Brand says this is great on the front, and then a whole blurb on the back that's like selling it to you, going like, you need to buy this book because you're standing in a bookshop and you're reading it, and then it's got a barcode on the back that's saying like, this is part of a system of logistics where this happens, and and there's, you know, and there's all of this stuff, and there's the branding and there's the price, and like, already it's inviting me out into the world and out into practicality and everything like that. And so it felt like such a gift to have none of those, but also like what's the word, heresy, or like a transgression or something like that. I was like, this isn't a book, you know, you can't have a book that hasn't got a barcode on the back. And so like this is why the idea of making something holy feels exciting to me and feels like a real thing rather than kind of sanctimonious thing. You know, it's not like holy as in, you know, let's all wear, you know, special clothes, but it's holy in the sense of whole, you know, and it's holy in the sense of genuinely listening for what's needed.